This is going to be a fun video because we are going over the things that annoy Commander players and us the most.
I'm Mia, and I like complaining on the internet.
I'm BZ. I was born complaining on the internet. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. We're not going to complain about them because they got great deals on cards, great deals on singles, and they get free shipping on your orders $50 or more.
We love you, Card Kingdom. Sealed, shipped all to you in one package, and that's one of the best ways to get cards in the mail. Card Kingdom, we love you. Dragon Shield, also, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS, that's nerds.
That is nerds. You can save 5% on your Real Money tax dollars on your entire order. That includes everything from sleeve crafters and their boxes and their cool organizational stuff. And, of course, they're like mats and dual mats.
Get them on the Shield website. Use our link. Simple. Also, Moxville.com. Sponsor this video, but not right now. We're going to bamboozle you with an ad later.
Liars. And we have a Patreon that you can go to and you can see never before seen content anywhere else, including gameplay and podcasts, and you can get your stinky decks audited by us.
That will be 10% less stinky, I promise. So this is a fun video. We're going to try to keep it lighthearted. This is pet peeves, things that annoy Commander players the most. I think this also could be considered like a crash course of what not to do in a Commander game if you're new to the format, or if you want to know some social do's and don'ts. So we're gonna alternate between things that are my pet peeves, things that are Mia's pet peeves, and also things that you voted on in our community polls that got the most likes of the most community hated pet peeves.
I mean, you guys love complaining just like us. So let me start with my first complaint. My first complaint is pile shuffling. I made a PowerPoint on this that was pretty lengthy. Stop pile shuffling. A guide to be a less annoying and actually fair player. And just in general, pile shuffling takes a really long time to do. You can cheat pretty easily with it. And it's just like, if you have to mulligan, that takes forever. I want to go when I do games. I don't mind if we are in a very casual game and you just want to tuck your 7 to the bottom and draw a new 7 and kind of check it from there. If you want to do a few riffle or frivolous or mass shuffles, depending on what you're into. Most people don't like their cards bent. But overall, I think that pile shuffling, except for if you have to count your cards because you lost one or something, is generally a waste of time.
I think this is like a misconception. I know that I've seen plenty of people, they'll be at a game and they'll start pile shuffling. I'm just like, well, what are we trying to do here? What is the goal with pile shuffling? Because some people will say that they drew 2 bad hands in a row and now they're mulliganing again. And they're like, I gotta do something. I gotta shake something up. It's like 2 mash shuffles will take a tenth of the time and randomize you more. Really, all you're doing that's effective with pile shuffling is touching every card, which is a good way to count the cards. If you're not trying to count the cards, seriously, there's no mathematical reason to do it. It does not randomize your cards any faster. It's way slower, I think, demonstrably. Please stop pile shuffling unless you need to count them.
And this is coming from someone who has what they'd call baby hands. I have very small hands, and I make BZ shuffle my decks all the time, mostly because he promised to. But if you have a friend you trust to shuffle your deck, you can either have them do it if you're a little bit superstitious, or if you want to do a few cuts here and there and then a couple mash shuffles, that could really help randomize your deck. But I think overall, having respect for people's time in Commander is one of the most important things you can do, and pile shuffling is a way to disrespect their time.
Yeah, and I'm not going to accuse anyone who pile shuffles of actively disrespecting my time, but I do think if you can hear this, it's better to just not do it.
I definitely agree. But enough about me hating pile shuffling. What do you hate?
Well, you're not the only one, for sure. My first one is going to be attacking the player with the most life. This is interesting. It's one of my newest pet peeves, certainly. But I think every single time somebody says, I'm attacking this person, and the reason they give is because they have the most life, I think life totals are not relevant enough in the early game with all of the other information you have to ever make a decision based on that. If my opponents are at 38, 38, and 40, this is not enough information to determine who to attack. Somebody might have a Corval deck. Might be a person at 30 with the other opponents at 40 who has a Corval deck or some kind of thing that's going to combo off next turn, or that I know has huge mega potential to go infinite, or just has a stronger commander than anybody else. That's the person to attack. I just think never let the life total alone be the reason you attack somebody. I think if you're worried about a life gain deck being able to double their life later in the game, then that's a good reason to attack them. But the actual number being higher than other numbers, I just think does not factor in at all. I'll get off the soapbox.
No, I completely agree with you. I'd also like to add rolling to see who gets attacked. I think this is in the same vein, and I don't think it's either one is very good. I know people don't want to make enemies overall and you just go, oh, well, you have the most life, but like in Commander, you have to pick someone, and I think you should pick it with the most strategic decisions in mind versus just who happens to have a higher life total because they didn't shock in a land or because they didn't fetch with an arid mesa or something.
Yeah, like I have had turn ones where I fetch and shock and play some silly one drop like a Deathrite Shaman, and then somebody else just plays a tap land. And it's like I've built out a board and I'm more scary than the person who just played a tap land. But because I'm at 37, people will just go, oh, well, he's gotten hit. I better distribute it evenly. It's like, that's not really necessary when everybody's above 30. I think we can just go based on, like, who are you the most scared of?
Yeah, or who uses life to pay for things, like if someone has a Necropotence or something like that. Overall, life totals are important in Commander, but you can always win with one life, so you should always attack the person where you can attack them, or they can use the life the most.
Next up, we've got our first community entry, and this is complaining when you're the threat. I think this can really suck a lot of the fun out of a game. I definitely agree with people for the most part. If somebody is winning and then being targeted, most people would say appropriately because they're going to win or they're in a dominating position, the other players feel like they need to team up to take them out. Complaining in that spot, like genuine complaining, not like, guys, why are you attacking me? But like, what the heck? I can never do anything. I think that really like yucks people's yums, and I think it's just not a great look.
I think so too. I think that in Commander, you kind of have to either own being the threat or not be the threat until you're actively winning the game. So when you're complaining, when you're the threat, you're already, all of your information is on board for the most part. Everyone knows you're the threat. I think this kind of is understandable if you are not the threat at certain points and then people still think you're the threat. If you like don't have a board or something and people keep like destroying your stuff the second you can put out because you were the threat, I can understand that. But if you are actively the threat, you need to be taken care of in the other people's eyes, and they should be using the removal on you.
Yeah, I think a good example of a card I see that people are frustrated when it's removed a lot is Vorinclex Voice of Hunger, and it does lend itself to the reason I don't think Vorinclex is that good of a card. It's pretty easy to answer in terms of like mana trading, and it's a card that when you play it, you are winning the game. You are now in the lead. Other players are going to try to remove that from the board or kill you or something so that the board is now even, because Vorinclex is one of those cards that creates a huge resource imbalance. I see people cast a Vorinclex and then get really mad when it dies. It's like, I don't know what you thought was going to happen. I mean, either you untapped and won the game, or it dies. That's the only two options, really.
I mean, it's also just a card where I think it creates so much salt because it affects everyone else just like it affects you, but it's such an imbalance that it's not just like, oh, maybe your stuff's coming in like tapped versus untapped. It's like, no, like you won't have a next turn because I will have way too much mana and your lands won't untap.
Yeah, I know it feels bad to have your stuff destroyed, but I think contextualizing it in like from the other player's point of view is like, what option do they have? I mean, when you play a card like that, you got to know sometimes it doesn't swing your way. I don't think making it the other player's problems is the way to go. What is your next one?
My next one is using your phone and not following the game. I really don't like when people are just texting the entire time and they have like something else to do. I can understand if it's an emergency or something like that. Or, it was like everyone's been ordering food and you just want to make sure that the delivery's on their way. But like, we have sat down to play a game, and I was talking about respecting other people's time earlier. If you have committed your time and all these other people have committed their time to playing the game, you should at least put a majority of your focus on playing the game. And if you can't, you shouldn't commit to the game to begin with, or you should, like, scoop at a certain point.
I think where I stand on this, and I think the community could definitely agree with parts of this, where I stand is if somebody's kind of, like, checking their phone, I'm kind of like, I guess I'd prefer you didn't do that in my head, but I'm not going to say anything. It really isn't that big of a deal. But where I think the community comes in too, and this is like the meme, is someone who like texts on their phone for an entire player's turn, then it untaps and they go, what happened? Or wait, I had a response. It's like, no freaking way. Absolutely not. You don't get any favor by not paying attention, passing priority or whatever you had to do for game actions to take place while texting. not paying attention and then complain about the result. I just don't think you have a right to do that.
I mean, Magic is such a time-intensive game. I feel like you need to be on top of things if you're playing your instance at the right time, if you're countering the things you want to, if too many game actions have gone by because you were distracted with other things. And I also feel this is the same as talking with your friend who comes over and stuff. Because if you're having a full conversation with them while the game is happening, a quick hi and hello is very different than like, okay, so what are we doing after this?
Or like, tell me about your bad beat at the tournament, side event
Yeah.
that you played. It's like, I don't know. We're kind of doing something.
Yeah, but if you are using your phone, you could be using it to like tutor or something. Because I do that every once in a while. If I have like a vampiric tutor in my hand, I want to tutor on moxfield.com, the best place online to build your decks, because that is actually where I use my deck list. If I have a vampiric tutor or demonic tutor and I don't want anyone to know, I will like slyly go on my phone, check to see what I can tutor for, and then put it away and be like, okay, well now I know what I'm looking for, so I don't waste everyone else's time.
I think the time-saving aspect of it is really huge because even if you cast, main phase demonic tutor and, there's not really a shortcut you can make, you just have to find the card. If you don't know what you want, it's way faster instead of picking up your deck and thumbing through it and possibly missing cards or whatever, to just go on Moxfield. It's sorted by visual grid. That's the best way to go. You can see it and you go, oh, all right, what's my best sorcery? Okay, this one. I'd probably get, creature. And it's really fast. I've started using it when I tutor. It's just way faster. And if you have like a vampiric tutor and people don't know, great. Figure it out on your thing without, wasting time or confusing people. And then you've got to go end step vampiric tutor, find it 5 seconds. People will appreciate a 5-second vampiric tutor for sure.
It doesn't look great, but it is so functional, and I just am very happy to be using Moxfield in those moments.
Moxfield, that's the best way to do it. Absolutely. Next up, we got a community post. It's whatever. We got a community pet peeve. It's mana rocks mixed in with your lands. Now, I don't personally take too much of offense to this. I might even do it every once in a while as like a space thing, but I definitely get how it could be a little bit annoying. I think one thing with mana rocks getting mixed in with lands that I've seen many times actually is like somebody plays an austere command, destroys all creatures that cost 4 or greater and all artifacts. Players resolve that, but then you find someone untapping with a mana rock. You're like, how did that happen? It's like, well, you had it in with your land, so that could be confusing. I can understand this one. Mostly I let this one slide. How do you feel?
I completely agree with you. I don't think I really put them in the same category, but for the most part, I won't notice, which is also the bad part. If people play their mana rocks with their lands, it's also bad that I won't notice, because if someone plays a Vandal Blast, I might not notice that they still have their Soul Ring until next turn, and then they have already done a bunch of game actions, and it's so hard to say, oops, takesies, backsies, because you couldn't cast that last spell if an entire half turn has gone by at that point.
That's true, and I think the other thing about where I can understand where they're coming from with wanting to see the mana rocks separate is if you got them with your lands, maybe I don't know that it's the right time to fire off like a Vandal Blast, or if I want to choose all modes with Farewell because I don't know what you have. So like artifacts is less tempting in those modes, or like casting the Vandal Blast, maybe I don't do it because I don't see 3 of the 7 artifacts in play.
Yeah, or the Druid of Purification. I don't want to cast that unless I can destroy 3 or 4 things, and if I only see 2 things on the board and lands...
Maybe you hold it.
Yeah, maybe you hold it, and that's... I'm not going to say withholding information, but I feel like it's a little deceptive at times.
It's not intentional, I don't think, but it can have, like, effects in the game that you don't, like, foresee. My next one is one that I feel pretty passionately about, actually. It's holding back the win when you have the win. I just personally find this very patronizing, and I don't think it really adds to the experience. This is definitely like your experience may vary type of like pet peeve, but for me, someone like allowing me to pop off kind of just takes all the fun out of it in the first place. Like I can very easily just sleeve up and play another game, but I really don't want someone to come into the game with the attitude of like, I'm going to let everybody else pop off and I'm allowing them to do this. And to me, this creates too many gray areas of like, well, how long do you hold back the win? Are you just delaying the game? Are you going to try to win later? Which opponent are you going to let win? Because you also have counter spells in your hand. It's just like, I don't know what your goal is at that point. Like, what are we doing? Because I at least like to sit down with the game of like, I'm going to play to win. I think everybody should play to win. That would be cool. I would appreciate that as like the default. If someone wants to play differently, just let me know and then we can maybe do it.
I think that when people come in and they don't all have the play to win mindset, that it just really creates an uneven and just bad play experience for everyone else because we all have different expectations that weren't really communicated earlier in the game. I don't really like when people play with their food too. I think, as you talked about, it's really patronizing, and it's like, I can understand a fumble of the win, but it's like, no, I let you do that. It's like, this is a game. You try and beat me then. Beat me if you can. I would love to play another one.
Right, because like I'm just not going to hold back my win conditions, and then And then if like I win a game but find out that you orchestrated me winning the game, that makes it less fun for me. I would have so much rather lost in a blaze of glory or like won the game by myself.
Okay, question though. BZ keeps track of his data on his spreadsheets. What would happen? Would you check that off as a loss?
I do keep track of win rate, and I don't account for any shenanigans. So if somebody king makes and I lose, I just mark it as a loss. I think there's a lot of variance, so I don't really try to get too koopy. I maybe at some point in the future I do a video about like which of my decks win the most, because I think that might be interesting, but down the line. Our next one is yours, I believe.
My next one is modified precon, as you can see as our beautiful sign up there. I think that there are a lot of amazing precon commanders, whether that's your Edgar or your Lathril or your Ur-Dragon or whatever, really. I think that there are a lot of cool commanders that have been base commanders that come out, and I think when people say modified precon, that can mean so many different things. Does it have combos in it? Did you change out your mana base? Is it just you added 5 cards and swapped 5 cards? I think the term modified precon is very misleading, and when we talk about power level and stuff, when we have our rule 0, I think that we usually like to do like free spells, fast mana, tutors, do you have combos, and that sort of thing. But I think saying modified precon is a very broad statement, and because of that, it's very misleading.
It really gives me nothing to work with. We really stick to, do you have fast mana, tutors, or combos? And if you say, I have a modified precon, that doesn't answer any of my questions. You could easily have 1, 2, or all 3 of those, or none of them. And it doesn't tell me how strong your deck is. I think there's like a Ship of Theseus problem also with a modified precon. Like, can we as a community at least hammer down what that even means? Because if you take out every card of a precon and then switch them all out, is that still the modified precon? Or I think maybe a better definition would be like 10 cards or less swapped in and out. Because at a certain point, you're closer to an EDH rec average deck than a precon. And I don't think saying I switched 25 cards out is necessarily still a precon. Like when we do precon videos, we upgrade the precon and we take out 25 and we add 25. I don't know if what we made is an upgraded precon. We understand that we took the precon and upgraded it, but I don't think then going to a table saying this is an upgraded precon is the most helpful.
I think so too. I mean, I have seen people sit down and be saying this is a modified precon, and they have had the commander and 99 different cards. That's a different deck. I think it's very tough for new players overall, and tough for people who want to accurately match deck power levels to begin with. When people say that, and whether they're trying to be misleading or not, just kind of give off the aura of it is lower than it actually is.
Yep. Next up, Community has presented one, and I would not have put this by myself because I haven't really seen this, but this might be because we're like public facing and people like tend to want to jam games with us. So this one is just silently playing everything, and I didn't even know this was a thing. Apparently, you sit down for a game at CDH or EDH local game night and someone just doesn't say anything, and I think that's definitely a fair critique if this is happening. Like, if someone just sat down and just silently played and stuff, didn't read anything, didn't clarify, that's not somebody I want to play with again.
I completely agree. I think there's a difference between you don't want to explain everything. Like, you don't need to explain to me what Soul Ring does or what your basic mountain does. But if it's a card that's new or something, then you should be speaking. I think one of the best things about Magic is the ability to communicate, whether that's politicking or seeing new cards or having wacky interactions. But I think it kind of ruins the spirit of the game if people aren't like announcing triggers, for instance. I've seen that before. I've seen people with Ristic Study triggers, and I know it's really annoying to say, like, do you pay the 1? Trigger, whatever. But I think it's also worse to assume that you can just draw a card because that's unfair advantage. And also, if they forgot about it, they should have the choice to know.
Yeah, it's not like you didn't say pay 1 so I draw. That's not even how it works. I think just like forcing yourself to be silent is never really good for the table's understanding of the game. It probably makes the game take longer, and it's probably not going to make you a ton of friends. I think Commander is very much a social format, so if people want to be politicking at least a little, you don't have to politic, but you can still explain what your cards do, respond to things, say in response, instead of just going, it's like, I don't know what is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I really like to communicate at tables. I think the best tables are when you're joking and laughing and everyone has like a pretty good idea of what's going on and you just have good vibes. But having the silent player is, especially if you don't know them, is such bad vibes.
It's definitely like, let's just get this game over with more than let's play another game. Next up, also community submitted, but this is something everyone can agree on. And if you do this, I heavily request that you rethink all of your decisions. This is pub stomping. Pub stomping refers to communicating your deck's power level a certain way and playing an entirely different way. If I bring a super competitive mono blue draw my deck to a pod and I say this deck's a 7, or I say it's an upgraded precon, or I just say it's an okay deck, and I just destroy everybody with knowing all this information, that makes me a liar. That's what pub stomping is. You can, of course, accidentally bring a deck that's too strong, or maybe you guys skimp on the rule 0 and it's like, oops, I didn't know that combos weren't allowed or something. That's not really on you. That's not pub stomping. Pub stomping is like premeditated. You knew you want to get an extra win against people who aren't ready for your deck. I don't understand where this comes from, because it's not even like a glory thing to me. It's like, what if the players you're playing with probably have other decks? They could have brought out better decks. It's not like this was your best deck, I defeated it with my best deck. It's like, I lied to you and you brought out a 5.
I mean, I think it's such a point of pride to be able to say I had competent opponents and I won with my skill and with a little bit of luck, not I kind of like bamboozled them and lied to them, and now that I have this win. It's like, because when you pub stomp, you're not in a tournament. You don't pub stomp in tournaments because everyone in a tournament knows what the rules are. So when it refers to pub stomping, you're definitely at a casual table. These people do not have the same expectations as you. So already, what's your win? What's your goal? What's your motive? To feel good about a win? I don't think that's really, like, there's not even prizes on the line. That's the craziest part to me.
Yeah, and I also think you lose out on like social equity. It's like, okay, great, you won that game. Guess who you're never going to play with again? Those 3 people. How many groups of 3 at a local Commander game store can you destroy your reputation with before you suddenly can't play with anybody? It's like, cool, you got 6 wins. You're 6-0. And now you can never play another game. It's just not a good idea for any reason at all. Next up is another one of yours.
I mean, this plays into it very well. It's skipping Rule 0. Rule 0 is the talk before the game, where you guys discuss kind of what your expectations are for the game, whether that's the type of decks you're playing, what your win cons are, how long you want the game to go, if there's anything people are uncomfortable playing with. Some people might not want you like touching their cards, for instance, or maybe they don't want to play with combos, and all these things are fair, but they have to be communicated before the game. And I think that when you don't communicate these things prior, it leads to like either resenting people, or just really bad feelings later in the game, or just like pub stomping, or just really like negative feelings with the game overall. And I think I would rather have a 5-minute Rule 0 talk to make sure our decks were played than to like have 10 seconds and not have it, and then have a mismatched game and just have bad feelings overall.
Yeah, this can definitely turn people off of the whole format if they play the first game and they're excited about it, and then something happens during Rule 0 where they're like, well, that wasn't the game I expected at all. This format might not be that fun. Like, I think land destruction's a big one. The 3 we asked for, like we said before, tutors, combos, and fastman. I think those are the 3 things that can change the layout of a game very quickly and very consistently. That I want to know if you have any of them, because I want to be able to match you on either one of those points.
Yeah, but there are also some things that are a little bit less than that. Like, some people don't like playing against poison. Beezy and I have both had poison decks.
I ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, if people don't like that, you go, okay, and you just sleeve up something else, so you get something else. But I think that all of this stuff should be communicated prior. Like, when people say, like, it's not that attracts a deck, and it is that attracts a deck, I go, yeah, it is that attracts a deck. Do you want to play against it?
That's what she says. Like, it is that one, yeah. It's the worst thing you could think of. Do you want to play against it? And most of the time they're like, yeah. But I think if you just go, this is Atraxa, and then they're like, cool, here's Ur-Dragon, and then you start playing and you go Glisten Ralph, they might be like, okay.
Yeah, it's just communicating those expectations up front, I think, just makes for a better play experience overall. And I think that's just helping new players get into the format, and just experienced players just want to stay in the format.
All right, next up is me. I got to say, I think this is one that I need to work on a little bit, because I think it bothers me too much. This is missing free attacks. I'm mostly talking about when the table can pretty much openly determine if an attack is free or not. So, like, everybody plays a tap land, then you play a 2-drop. Then everybody plays a tap land, and then it's your turn again, and you can clearly just attack anyone with no repercussions. If somebody misses that, I do tend to, like, say, are you sure you don't want to attack? It's free. I think it's also fine to just let somebody make a misplay, right? Like, if you can say it's a free attack, missing out on 2 damage is basically a misplay, and you're really not going to curry any negative favor from 2 damage versus not doing it. I still think I probably should modify what I do a little bit. I think instead of saying, hey, you got a free attack here, do you want to take it? I might just go attacks, because they do have a combat step, and then I'd be like, hey, you have attack? But I don't know. I don't really want to tell people what to do. But I also hate when people miss free attacks. At least know in my head, I'll be like, that was a free attack.
I think this is the point where BZ and I do disagree. I think it's kind of obnoxious when he does this. I mean, I like free attacks too, and like I can see that very well. However, I think that like maybe someone has a convoke spell or something.
Well, I'm
maybe.
saying when it's obvious, like we're talking turn 2 1-drop flyer.
But BZ will also just say that regardless of whether he knows whether people have attacks or not. So
maybe the turn 5 2/2 flyer, I could be like attacks and not. Mia doesn't have any blockers.
Yeah, and so, I mean, maybe it's because I've been on the receiving end of a lot of free attacks because of BZ, but I also think that it's kind of I think it's a point where if people are trying to learn, it's okay to say, like, hey, like, you have a free attack, like, you can attack me or something, or if they're, like, trying to figure it out, you can be like, well, I don't have anything, so you can attack me, like, I'm open, but I think I don't really like when people offer unwarranted advice, so I would not like hearing this.
Yeah, I think I am going to modify it. I can at least say here, you're probably missing free attacks. Don't do that because it lowers your win percentage. But maybe in the game, I'll be like, attacks?
I mean, it's also, I think of the way it's like, if you ask me for help, I can give you help to the best of my ability of like, I have nothing here. Like, I don't think I'll block with this. But also, I think it's a matter of, it's not my job to police you.
If they say, who should I attack?
Yeah, if you ask me, I'll tell you. But also, if you don't ask, I don't think it's really my job. And I don't think it's my place to tell you.
So it's like a pet peeve that I have that may be a pet peeve other people have because the thing that I'm doing is also the pet peeve. So maybe I'll just take the percentage points, call it a wash, and just not really point out free attacks as much, unless I'm being a little stinker,
You are always
sometimes
you
gotta be a little stinker. Like,
if you're with your homies, you can do that to annoy them and get on their nerves.
For sure. You got to pull out the little stinker moves every once in a while. All right. The next is the community, and I think this is pretty fair, is not knowing what your cards do. This isn't like you have to know every interaction of every 2 cards in your entire deck. But I think that you do have a little bit of a responsibility when you sit down to generally know how your deck plays, what the cards, basically say. And I think that if you're constantly fumbling around and slowing the game down, I think that is a little bit on you.
I think so too. I mean, if you are very upfront and honest and say like, hey, I haven't played this deck that much. Like, are you okay with that? Like, I'm still learning that, or I'm still learning the combos. Then you should be upfront with that in the Rule 0 talk. But I think that if your deck revolves around like taking damage, for instance, you should know the difference between taking damage and loss of life, because that's a core mechanic that your deck functions on. Right.
Or if you have a lot of tutors, I think you really should brush up on what you can tutor for, because it probably means your deck's a little bit stronger. And like, all right, you've got a few lines to win the game. You probably are only tutoring for one of like 7 cards. I think it could put a little damper on the game if you really just don't know what your cards do. I definitely agree with this a little bit. But I'm not going to fault a new player or somebody who hasn't played a deck in 6 months. That's totally fine. But I think you get what we're saying.
Yeah, I think that overall, if you have a general idea of how your cards interact with one another, that's fine. And if you need help with how they interact with other people's cards, then you should take the time to like look it up during the game or ask them.
Yeah. I have no problem with anyone who's like, well, how does my creature work if I steal your creature? It's like, well, let's figure it out. I don't know. Yeah. But that's not something you should know automatically. Next up was partially the communities, and then I wanted to add my own little twist on it. This is Takesies Backsies. I think Takesies Backsies are totally cool. It's definitely a chill environment that I want to promote, Takesies Backsies. And that's just saying, oh, I made a misplay and I realized it pretty quickly. Can we just reverse the game so that I can make a different play or undo my play or not play my spell? I think that's pretty reasonable. I do, however, have a certain form of Takesies Backsies that I don't want to say are like not allowed, but I think they can put a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth of the person playing like the card. And I think the perfect example of this is Ashiok Dreamrender. It's got a static that says your opponents can't search their libraries. But Ashiok doesn't actually play this way because of Takesies Backsies. It's really weird. Takesies Backsies existing basically changes the text of Ashiok. It doesn't play like your opponents can't search libraries. It plays like your opponents can't cast spells that would search their libraries. Because if somebody runs a Farseek into an Ashiok, 99% of the time they're like, I would go, you can't search. And they would go, oh, okay. And then we'd be okay taking it back. And I think it's still fine to take it back, but it's just a little, you know what I'm saying? It's just a little bit weird when the text of the card changes because Takesies Backsies exist. But I think generally 99% of the time, takesies backsies are totally chill.
I think so too. I think it really depends on how much information was revealed since the takesy backsy. For instance, like if you go to your end step and you forgot to play a land and no one's cast a spell and you're going to someone else's turn and you play a land, I think that is perfectly fine because nothing has changed and no one's cast any spells, so you don't have any new information. So I think that's pretty okay. But I think that if you meant, oh, I meant to counter that, and you're like in somebody else's main phase or something, and that happened in your main phase, I think too much time has gone by at that point. I also think takesies backsies, like, I'm not going to say has a certain number, but it's like, one, is the information on the board versus has someone like really like revealed information to you? I think those are like two different types. And two, how many are you really allowing in a game? I think there, and how, and like kind of what is the severity? Did you fumble your win con? Because like I've done that before and I don't take that back because that's on me. I have to learn sometime.
That's fair, because like how many do you get? Because I think at a certain point it just bogs the game down. Like you can't have 10 per game. We can't just constantly rewind so everybody's playing perfectly. So it's an interesting balance. I think every play group has to strike it differently, right? Like how many are you cool with? Because everybody's cool with the first or second one, but how many people are cool with the 8th or the 9th one? I don't know.
I think it also depends on what types of formats you're playing too. Like I think CEDH is very unforgiving in higher power. You kind of expect people to be playing at a level where takesy backsies are less okay because you have so much free interaction, because you can be doing anything at any point.
It could easily mean the difference between winning and losing.
So I think that depending on the power level, there are different levels of takesy backsies that are okay.
How would you feel about, like, let's use the Ashiok example. Like Ashiok has been on the board for like 2 turns, it's very clear what it does, but somebody tries to cast like a Farseek. Like, would you just be like, hey, you can't do that, but you can put it back to your hand if you want to? Because obviously if you say you can put it back to your hand if you want to, they're always going to do it.
Yeah, like I think I would say that if it's happened the first time or if I don't know them very well, but if this has happened multiple times and they tried to do it like next turn too, I'd be like, you're not getting away with that. Or it's like, or if they've had this similar interaction before, like you played the same decks against each other, this has happened last game, like I guess it depends on how much time has had it on the board too. Like have they watched someone else try to run a Terramorphic Expanse into it and also seen that they can't search the library and then they tried to Farseek into it,
I really want to know what you guys think of this specific example. Like, would you let someone do a takesies backsies on Ashiok if it's known information? Or if not, how many times would you let it go before you're like, all right, come on. Maybe another thing you could do is say like, all right, I got this Ashiok. It stops you from searching. The table gets one, like if I say this as I cast it, the table gets 1 takesies backsies, but then I got to, go with the card.
I think 1 is fair.
Maybe that's a way you could do it. Because I don't want to make feel bads for them, but I also don't want to make feel bads for me because like, well, my card doesn't work if there's no penalty for it.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say 1 that's like
collective 1,
and you're like you make it very clear with everyone because like as I said before, Magic's biggest strength is communication and the game doesn't really operate without it. The next one is one that I have. It's open containers on the table. This is when somebody will have something like a soda or something, or an open food,
a water perhaps, anything you could imagine,
and anything that can spill on the table and ruin other people's cards. This also applies to people with stuff on their hands that pick up other people's cards, like Cheeto dust. Don't do that. I think that overall this is very disrespectful for both people's property and just kind of shows a lack of caring. And cards are very expensive. A lot of people do put money into this game, whether you do or don't, I'm sure that people don't want their property ruined. So I think it is a little bit tough to see things that can ruin their stuff like very close to other people's cards. It's one thing to ruin your own cards. It's like, that's on you.
Do whatever you want.
But the second that I see if someone knocks over their water and I see it running towards my mana crypt or something, I'm going to be pretty upset, and I think I'm rightfully so.
Definitely. And I think this probably to me falls more under like awesome life hack versus like maybe something you're not thinking of versus like, it's a pet peeve because it's just like putting open containers or any container on the floor or on a coffee table behind you instead of on the table you're actually playing on, just a huge level up. Because even when we're playing around friends where I don't think anyone's going to spill anything, something always happens every once in a while. But like since we started doing this rule, when I started meeting Mia's friends, they did this and my friends never did. I'm like, this is way better. There's no downside. I can turn around and drink my water. And I've had tons of things spill on whatever. My friend, shout out to Ken, he spilled a Coca-Cola into a bowl that had dice D20s in it. And it's like, so they're all just like destroyed. So it's like, I've seen tons of stuff happen and it's really like no cost. Because I've also knocked over water bottles or whatever, like cups that are on the ground. And then it's like, I don't care at all. Who cares? Whatever. I'll clean it up. Or if we're outside, just leave it. Go get a new one. Like, pretty big level up.
I mean, cards are so sentimental. Cards are so expensive, as you know. I think that it's very easy to be considerate of other people's properties and your own property just by keeping food and just drinks that are not covered or that leave residue off the table.
All right, let's go back to the community. This one is called king making. You may be familiar with what king making is. It is when one player actively tries to help, or I could say in some cases hurt, other players so that they alter the outcome of the game. This isn't as simple as I have 40 power in play and my opponents are at 40. Who do I kill? That's just playing the game. But it's more like countering a spell that doesn't benefit me to counter at all, or, sacking something to destroy this player's thing, or declaring early on that I'm going to take this player out. It's definitely a feel bad. Don't mistake tough choices for king making, but it's definitely something that I think you know it when you see it.
Yeah, I think there's also a tough time where it's like, I have a counter spell. This person's going to win. I have to counter their thing. Some people might accuse you of king making the other person. It's like, well, we were going to lose regardless. So having more time just helps to know whether I could win or not. I think you should always take the actions that prevent you from losing the least.
Yeah, so that's a good example. If two people have an I win combo that they know about, the first person's going to go for it. And if you don't counter it, you lose the game. But you also know that the second person is going to do the exact same thing and you will lose. I think it's totally reasonable to just say, I'm going to counter this because I'm going to prevent myself from losing as long as I can. Then the next person goes. And I think king making is not something that we should view as always bad, because in that situation, it's unavoidable. You have to do it. Just it stinks a little bit, but we have to do something about it. But I think what players feel bad the most about is the things that are very preventable. Like, why are you targeting all my stuff? Or why are you letting this player draw 20 cards? Or why are you deciding not to react in a way that makes me think you don't want to win the game for this one player? Definitely that part of it can feel bad.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things like people not sacrificing things to dockside to give other people way more treasures, or just having things as you can draw a bunch of cards with Ristic Study. I don't know, because I don't feel like paying or something like.
It's I need a better reason than that.
Yeah, I just because it's random, because it's fun, because I want to see what happens are not real answers, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of we're all coming in to try and win the game, and I think that's a different expectation of let's just see what happens versus I'm going to do what I can to make sure that I have the best chance of winning.
Yeah, so definitely king making can be weird, but if sometimes you're going to be forced into it, you have to kill one player or you have to let one player win because you're going to lose no matter what. It's that sucks. I wouldn't get mad at people for that, but when you're just going out of your way to do it or just deciding you don't care suddenly, that's pretty annoying. Next up is another community submitted one. This one's also pretty reasonable, I'd say. Inappropriate gear. Magic is a game for all ages. There are plenty of kids playing the game. There are also plenty of people who just don't want to see certain things that are not generally allowed in public anyway. And so I think if you've got sleeves, deck boxes, play mats, backpacks that have, how do you want to describe this? Potentially offensive,
inappropriate
iconography?
Things where you would not want to show children. I think it's a matter of consent, right? Most people didn't consent to seeing this, and it's not something that would be acceptable in a normal public space, so I don't really see why it would be acceptable here, especially since if you're at a convention or a game store or something that is public, a kid or someone who might not be, or who might be offended might walk by. I think public spaces should be welcoming for everyone, and if you do have something that is inappropriate, you should get the consent of everyone around you before you do it.
And even then, I think you still can't account for new people coming in, and I think you probably should still just err on the side of I guess you can have that at home where only certain people who already know about it or whatever can see it, but there's just no way to check everybody and say can I have this thing? And I think a lot of it too, some of this type of inappropriate gear is definitely stopped people of various groups from just going to events at all. And I think that's terrible because they're going to see this and they're well, I'm just offended that this is how you see this group of people, or this is how you see me. And it's yeah, they have a right to be offended and you should not bring this stuff.
It feels pretty uncomfortable at times. So I think communities as a whole should be trying to be welcoming to new players and existing players and just players overall. So I think that keeping your gear to a very acceptable and appropriate level of all ages and all backgrounds really helps the games go smoother and makes people feel comfortable.
Yeah. Speaking of gear, there's another gear related one for you.
This is not bringing supplies for your decks. For instance, I have a vampire deck with Edgar Markov, and I have a Lathril deck makes tons of elves. I am going to be bringing 1/1 tokens for each of those because I need a ton of vampires and a ton of elves. I can't expect everyone else to kind of supply those for me. There's a difference between, like, I used up all of my D6s because of counters. Can I borrow one of yours? Or I have to roll really quickly. Can I borrow a D20? That's like when people have dice on the table versus like, hey, my deck is revolving around clues, foods, and treasures. I don't have any tokens. Can someone have, like, give me some? I think that you should be able to bring like a general amount of supplies required for your deck, whether that's the tokens you need or infinite tokens or a D20 and a few D6s or anything like that, really.
Or even just some handy thing that you have that you go like, hey, you know, I use blue sleeves for 1/1. It's like, great, whatever. As long as we can all agree on that and as long as you're only using it for one type of token, I think that's fair. But I think it's not an unreasonable ask at all to say that if you play an Edgar Markov deck, you better be ready to represent your vampires that you will make guaranteed every single game. I just think that's a good level up to have. Maybe run a checklist before you go to the events. It's just because it's a bummer for you if you can't see the cool artwork that you got or you can't play this deck because you just don't have any of the stuff. I mean, you know, you better get paired.
I think it's also just percentage points too about winning, because with my Edgar deck, if I can't represent the types of vampires that I have, there's like this one has lifelink, this one doesn't, and I only have a type that just has a standard 1/1 without lifelink, I might be missing points that I'm like gaining life prior because I didn't have those supplies prior.
All right, next up, it's a community one, but we all agree that this is not really something that should be done, especially without talking about it. Scooping as a spell. I don't really know how else to describe it, but I can describe it very easily in a couple sentences. Let's say someone's attacking you with my favorite example. Someone's attacking you with 100 power of life-linking creatures, and you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You have a couple choices, technically. You can't do anything in the game, but you can leave the game. So if you scoop before damage so as to stop the person attacking you from gaining 100 life, I don't think that that's within the spirit of having fun or playing the game. And it's also not really a game action that you're taking within the game to modify things at all. I think there's a difference between taking game actions to spite somebody and leaving the game to like bother them or to ruin their chances of winning the game. I think the community in general tends to agree that one is closer to being okay and the other one is not. There's definitely still a split on spite plays and whatnot, but I don't think you can be that mad at somebody tapping their mana, using their resources to cast a spell to leave them maybe the most alive, right? Like maybe I have an Aetherize and I still die, but I die less, or I die to something else immediately after. I don't think there's a problem with still playing that. But if it's like, I'm going to just scoop and use the power of taking my ball and going home to stop me from getting 100 life, like if I'm in that game, I would just not even allow that. I would say, okay, you're dead, and I'm going to gain this person 100 life now. It's like, that's not what we're doing.
I would gain 100 life. It's like, at that point, I think scooping is sorcery speed only.
I like that.
So scooping at sorcery speed is kind of respectful for everyone's time and game actions. But if there was someone that was attacking me or like getting attacked for 100 life link and they wanted to gain 100 and the person says scoop, I go, oh, no. We're going to be gaining you 100 because that's not in the spirit of Commander. It's like, you're going to die regardless, or you're going to leave the game regardless. Just they set that up. That is what their deck does. You should be able to reap the rewards of it because you made the play to kill someone.
That's the other thing about using your resources to like actually impact the game too. Because if I have an Aetherize, I can now say, if you attack me, I'm going to Aetherize, right? Like this is a play that uses like tangible game pieces to incentivize the person to do something or not in the future for future games. That is like falls well within the rules of the game. There's nothing like fishy about it. I can definitely say, I'm going to Aetherize if you attack me, even though I will be dead. It's like, I could never fault somebody for doing that. And that's way different from, if you attack me, I'm going to spite you. Like, not in the game, just, I'm going to spite you. It's like, let's not.
Yeah, I don't think that's really good. The next one is another type of spite. It is Blood Feud. I think this is some of the nastiest stuff you can do.
This is weird.
I'm so annoyed by this whenever it comes up. It's the type where it's turn 2. You have a mana dork. It's a 1/1. You have nothing to do to cast the mana. You go, okay, hit you for 1. It goes, I'm going to target you for the rest of the game. What does that accomplish? That lowers your win percentage, the person who says, I'm going to target you for the rest of the game, because there might be a different threat. That's like, I think this also goes in hand with like, don't make promises you're not willing to keep for the entire game or whatever your terms of the game is. But also, I think, like, unless you're with friends and you're just joking about it, I think the Blood Feud of the entire game of, I'm going to keep going after you. I'm going to destroy your lands because you did this. Because I took 1. Because that's part of the game. part of the game is to attack, to take damage, to whatever. And so you're playing the game, and I don't think you should be punished for playing the game.
I think I 100% agree. I don't even want to sound like I don't agree. I'm actually just going to make a entirely separate point. I think that at a certain point in the game, when it gets to winning or losing, you can say, hey, if you want to blow my best creature up, I'm going to have to kill you because I can't beat your board or because whatever. But like, if we're talking like, if you destroy my card draw engine, I'm going to go after you for the whole game. And it's like turn 4. First of all, I've seen this multiple times in games and they don't even ever follow through. I think it makes you look so foolish when you make this declaration of war that makes everybody else at the table, I promise, uncomfortable. And then later you just forget about it, or like first of all, now your word doesn't mean anything, but I didn't like your word in the first place. And it's like, what are you even talking about? What's going on? So if you're gonna make a blood feud and everybody's okay with it, keep your word at least. But like, I don't know, this gets pretty tedious pretty fast. And I could totally see if we're in the later stages where we're talking about eliminating people. That's fine. That's a threat. You can make those. But like, I'm going to ruin your game if you try to target my thing is not a good way to go about it.
That's just such bad player mentality. And I could see if people like didn't want to play with that person again, or if it was just like, yeah, I don't know, if all else is equal, I'll attack you because you had a really bad attitude and you're trying to do this stupid blood feud or whatever.
That's true. If all else is equal, I will attack the person with the worst attitude sometimes to just get them out of the game. So I would say that's a tangible incentive to try to like improve your mood at a game. Just to reiterate, I think it's entirely okay to say, if you kill my commander, I'm going to kill your commander. That's a trade. You know, I'm more than welcome to my spite play back at you or my, returning the favor. But like keeping this ongoing thing is just not a good social experience really for anybody.
I think just in general, you should be able to keep up your promises. I completely agree with what BZ said earlier about like, these don't even last too. You think that because I attacked you with a 1/1 mana dork in turn 2, that you're going to be able to keep it up keep attacking me and only me for the rest of the game, and all of your removals only going to go at me?
Like, no, you're wanting to win is going to override that 3 turns from now, and you're going to look silly.
Yeah, so I think another thing with this is make sure your word is good, If you make a promise, keep up with that. I think that's also like a, hey, if you say don't do this and I won't do this, and then you do the thing that you did, I think that is so awful. I think just the promises that you don't keep, I think Commander is based a lot, I'm not going to say on trust, but I think that if you say something, you should keep it up. And if you don't keep it up, everyone has the right to never take a deal with you or never trust you again because you've already proven yourself.
Right. It's one thing to say like, I'm not the threat when you think you are the threat, but it's a different thing to say that I won't blow up your creature if you leave me alone. They leave you alone and then you blow up their creatures. That's not what we're here for. Next up is a weird one that's for me, I don't really know how to express this one, but I think you'll understand, and I think everybody knows one person, and it's not even that big of a deal, but it is a pet peeve. That's what pet peeves are. I guess some of these are bigger deals. This is the least big deal of all the pet peeves. This is players who draw new cards and completely reset their entire train of thought. So I think a good example is somebody who, they want to be meticulous. They plan out their turn. That's cool. You count your lands. You know generally what you're going to do. But then every time you get new information, instead of like adapting that new information into your plan and deciding whether that warrants changing it, you reset everything and you have to start all over. I think it's just a trap people fall into. It's tough when you get a lot of new information all the time. I think maybe it's something to work on because it does slow the game down a pretty fair bit. I've definitely had some friends do this, and it's more of a light teasing than anything else. But when they go like, all right, how many lands do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. And then they draw a card. And then the first thing they do after drawing their card is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I was like, please. I'm like, no, you have 12 lands. Like, no, please stop. I just want to play more Commander.
BZ's just so neurotic. I do agree that you should be able to adapt your information, but BZ's so neurotic about this. If you find yourself doing this a lot, I don't know if this will help, but the way my brain works is I think I have like one of those like little flow charts, like the office type flow charts. It's like, what am I trying to do? It's like, if my stuff doesn't get interacted with, advance my board, put 1/1 counters on this creature. If it does, rebuild, do this.
Attack BZ. If not,
attack BZ.
Rebuild. Yeah, convince someone else to attack attack music.
So I don't know. I always like to plan for like best and worst in my head. So I think it makes the game go a little quicker. And I think that having that information is just like, okay, I have this many. Even if you have to like write it down on like an infinite token.
That's
or
fair, yeah.
I mean, taking notes is allowed in Commander. If someone reveals their hand and you want to take notes, that is allowed.
Yeah, this is really not that big of a deal. It's maybe closely related to like know what your cards do, if in terms of like know your general game plan, and know what your best draws are, so that that could potentially change something. Like if I draw a board wipe, I'm going to cast it. Generally, just knowing that or whatever that could help, but this isn't that big of a deal. I always save the least important one for last, but we save the next most important video for next, and that's this video. It's really important. You should watch it right now.